Right, everybody, hello. Welcome back to Inky Thoughts. Today, we're going to be diving into what it means to be a tattoo artist, looking a bit deeper into the profession. And being that I am nowhere close to being a tattoo artist myself, I've invited a good friend of mine, Adam, along. He is, by far and large, one of the people I think most capable of talking about this. And I think he might talk about this a bit more himself if you would like to introduce yourself, Adam.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the nice words, Matt. I'm Adam McDade. I'm a tattooist at Flesh in Manchester. And prior to that, I was working in the Northeast at 666 Studios as a tattooist while I did my practice-based PhD thesis in design. It was centered around my job as a tattooist. So that's kind of my profile.
That's quite a special profile indeed, to be honest, because there's not many. I weirdly enough, and it almost sounds like that joke that flies around sometimes where it's weird that there's two, that it happened twice, but I know only of two people that are both a tattoo artist or tattooist and a PhD at the same time. There might be more out there, but you are part of a very rare, I would say, club right there.
Yeah. Is it Dustin? The other
Yeah,
person?
Dustin, I've heard of. So I thought you might know of him as well. I was hoping one day to have both of you together. That would be fun.
That would be good. I came across his work sort of after my PhD, but it's hard to get hold of. I think in America, with mine being funded by the HRC, it's available through the British Library like freely. I don't know if that's the case in America. I don't know how it works. So it's hard to get hold of his work, but I understand that he did an autoethnographic account of being a tattooist over in the States. So I'd be really keen to find out.
It's sort of funny because there's some interesting similarities between the work you've done as far as I've understood it. I've mainly, read here some bits and bobs of your own research, what I've found, and then heard your brilliant talk at a conference we both attended earlier this year called the Inked Up, Marked Out, if I remember correctly.
Right,
which is quite great. A lot of tattoo nerds from academia, mainly social scientific fields. So then Adam teaching us all both to tattoo and teaching us what it is to be a tattoo artist today, which is what we're going to dive into as well today. But it is interesting because I think you're right, not to digress too far, because I've spoken briefly with Dustin online here and there, and it seems that it's more difficult to share it freely, the research in the States. He kept mentioning that he has a book coming out next year, which he's working hard on right now, and this seems to be going quite well. So I'll be looking forward to getting my hands on that book, hopefully at some point.
Yeah, well, that's probably a big part of it. If the thesis isn't openly available, then he's probably under some kind of restriction as to what you can share online. So that makes sense. It's probably a wise move.
The less beautiful side of academia today.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading it too, though, whenever it's available.
Absolutely. But taking it back a bit, what was the exact focus of your own research, actually? Because you were a tattoo artist first, a tattooer first, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird the way that it worked out. I was a tattooist before I started my PhD, but I was a tattoo apprentice, but I'd only kind of recently started the apprenticeship. So it was a really, I'll briefly go into it. It was a very serendipitous sort of thing, the way it worked out. In 2017, in January, I went traveling for a little while, sort of quit my job prior to that and just focused on a little bit of freelance illustration stuff. But I went traveling with no particular intent as to what would happen when I came back. And then I think I arrived back like April or something. And then I had a Instagram follow request from the studio owner of where I did my apprenticeship, Bez, who's like a very well-respected, renowned tattooist who I've been tattooed by prior and, have learned a lot from. And I messaged him just on a whim. The thought entered my mind at that point saying, are you looking for a tattoo apprentice by any chance? Because in the
brave.
Yeah. Well, in the years, like when I was, I don't know, maybe 2012, maybe before that, 2010 or so, when I was getting tattooed by him, I asked about an apprenticeship and he was like, go to uni, learn some kind of visual arts, and we'll take part in one and then I'll consider it. And that thought sort of left my mind as I sort of got through life. But yeah, I messaged him asking if that like apprenticeship offer was still available, and he said yes. So that started in May 2017. And then a couple of months after starting, I got an email from my previous MA supervisor asking if saying that there was funding available to do PhDs that involved a partner organization, practice-based in the field of design. He didn't know I was tattooing at that time. I hadn't been in touch with him because I'd like been out of academia for some time, other than like teaching occasionally, like on a part-time basis. And then so I explained that I was doing a tattoo apprenticeship, and then it just kind of fell into place like that. So it's a long way of saying, really, I said it would be short, but it wasn't, sorry. I started to learn to tattoo in May 2017, and then I started my PhD in October that same year, but none of it was planned. It just kind of happened, which I'm very grateful for, obviously. But yeah, that's sort of how it came about. And I don't think that was your question, though, was it? That was a tangent that I took aside.
No, it's okay. It's an important tangent. But I was wondering, how did you sort of, was it planned from the start when you started the PhD, from your perspective at least, that it was going to be about being a tattoo artist?
Yeah, well, it was about, so I was learning, my background academically it's all illustration. So my BA and MA or illustration and design. So the academic world is really intimidating to me, or at least was, and definitely still is, but to a lesser extent now. So I was learning to research at the same time as I was learning to tattoo. And I think that was quite important, because when I was like looking into what questions I can ask through practice and through my experience, like I was kind of simultaneously figuring out what that experience really looked like and how I can record it. So there was something. So yeah, my questions were surrounding the tattoo, the practitioner and the practice, because that was what was absent from the literature, because nobody has, I guess, been in a position to ask those types of questions or to look at those types of topics. And it very much requires tacit understanding and first-hand engagement. And because I was learning to engage in those things, to understand what my role was, I was recording the process as it kind of unfolded. And I thought that was, for me, it was quite a useful way to do it, because it was happening like in the moment. It was every kind of insight or whatever that I was gaining and recording in some capacity and trying to make sense of. That was just, okay, this is a chapter of my thesis. It just sort of unfolded that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's also the impression I got when I watched your talk at the conference earlier this year, where Adam very beautifully and quite eloquently and briefly presented some of his research findings. And when you talked about the different experiences you had, where you sort of in the moment had sort of these epiphanies, so to put it, for lack of a better term, about, oh, this is actually quite interesting. It was very clear. I very clearly remember the experience you talked about with the 18-year-old, and you were a younger tattoo apprentice yourself, and talking about how you suddenly realized, wow, this is actually quite impactful what you're doing, even if that's not necessarily thought in the moment from either. You may not in the moment be thinking, oh, this is going to be massively impactful, but it very clearly is.
Yeah. So that talk was about the sort of non-material aspect of the tattooist's role. And the bit that you're referring to, it was sort of an insight that I came to when, like, trying to understand, what that was and what were the various elements and factors at play that affect, how that is shaped. And so things like age, economic background, socio-cultural background, my skill level, their experience of being tattooed, or not having ever been tattooed, or perhaps not ever having been in a tattoo studio. All those things are relevant to understanding what the role of a tattooist is in various points. That's what that was kind of about. And that's the reason that for me, I think, is important, is because, again, methodologically, everything that's been looking at tattooing hasn't really paid much attention to the tattooist, but evidently it's a crucial part of, that topic. You can't have tattooing without a practitioner. So it's these sorts of things that I think are, necessary to look at, or were necessary for me to examine and record.
No, I absolutely agree. Also, because I often think about it because I'm from my family background. My dad's a plumber, and I often thought about tattooing as being in this weird limbo between being a trade skill but also being a very artistic job. Because I mean, for example, if a plumber is fixing some piping and that, you could easily pop off to the shops and do something. But with tattooing, it's way more intimate than that. You can't just leave your arm there with the tattoo artist and then piss off down the pub or something. You sort of engage in this cooperative relationship while you're in the session.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's still, with the example that you gave, like there's still like there's a skill that's required, but the person who is doing it isn't always like, the client of the plumber isn't necessarily present for the plumbing. They don't have to be, it's not necessary. Whereas tattooing it is absolutely necessary that the person being tattooed is there,
Yeah, exactly. So but that's also like the title of your talk was about, where it's more than just tattooing, and that's a good example of it, because if it was just about applying ink into the skin, it becomes way more simpler than that, and you start thinking about it way more like it could be any other craft, in a way, any other tradesmanship craft in a way. But it's the whole, even without adding the artistic aspect into it, there's so much more to it.
Yeah, 100%. It is an element of craft too, like always. But yeah, like you said, there's other things that are at play at the same time that are quite unique to that. Well, very unique to that medium, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, look at the social media aspect of being a tattooer today, which I'm gonna do a specific episode on that later on with a very interesting tattoo artist from France called Delphine. But even just that, like the whole way of advertising yourself is very unique to it, almost.
Yeah. I mean, it in some ways it is comparable, perhaps, to other visual arts and design, like illustrators, designers, whatever. But yeah, it's like Instagram mainly is embedded within tattooing culture, like at least in the UK and US and probably beyond. I know Facebook is still being used in some parts of the world. But yeah, Instagram 100% is integral to most, not everyone. There's some who manage to not have to use it, which is great. But for most, it is sort of like just part of the culture. There's no escaping it.
Yeah, but I mean, thinking about it, when you said that, even the people that don't use it or don't use social media and do it very, very old school, they're still sort of unique. Like I can't think of any other trade or craft where you hang up pictures of how you did before or what people can pick.
Yeah.
like it's almost like a weird way the same as going into viewing, kitchen models when getting a house put together.
Yeah, like the IKEA showroom sort of scenario. Yeah, I think the more, for me, it's tattooing is one discipline that is part of the broader creative arts and design disciplines, such as illustration, such as graphic design, whatever else. So you'd have a portfolio of work, you'd have perhaps testimonials from clients, even like that's just part of the package. There's no distinction just in terms of its, well, there is some distinctions, but if you were to categorize it, for me it falls within that.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, like there's so many different kinds of jobs, for lack of a better term, that you can kind of compare it to. Like you compare it to the service industry, you compare it to tradecraft, to creative arts. All like it's a lot of different aspects of a lot of different kind of career paths bound into one. Nowadays, I would argue.
Yeah. There's like, but in terms of its the aspect of promoting yourself and demonstrating your work, for example, that's, I would say, the creative arts is probably where that categorization may be. I think.
But it's also having it requires, at least nowadays, I think it might have been a bit different. We're both around the same age, but would have been way different way before we even started getting tattoos. But there's a whole level of social skill you at least, you may not need it, but it is kind of very useful to have as a tattoo artist nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. Well, certainly in like most studios now, I would say. I think it's, just it should, I mean, obviously it should have always been the case, but being nice to people is really important,
Yeah.
So, like, financial benefit, but for like just the experience of everyone, like obviously it hasn't always been that way in preceding decades, but yeah, like that's to me, that's like 100% a necessary part of the job. Like, don't be a dick. Like that's 100%.
But it's fun how, because I think today you could find a lot of tattoo artists that think the same way you do now. But I remember when I got my first tattoo, and luckily only with the first one, I went into a very old school studio, and it was very mechanical, for lack of a better term, how it went.
Yeah.
It was just, I came in, I had a drawing my brother drew when we were very young. They didn't give a shit about really critiquing the drawing. They just made the eye of the yang I wanted on my chest a bit bigger. That was it.
Okay.
Barely a talk through the tattoo session. Barely a word said. It was just 1.5 hours of like, all right, lie down, lie still.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Out, pay me, get out. Like,
Yeah. No, I think we've all had that. And I think so if you're introverted and shy tattooer, that's totally fine. I think it's just making it like a community. I think people can read like people's sort of demeanor quite well anyway, but just making it clear or making sure that someone is comfortable. You don't have to be extroverted, you don't have to be or whatever. You just have to like be sincere and friendly. And I think people will pick up on that.
It's a very basic level. Like it's not like you have to come up like some waiter or door guy at a fancy restaurant to be like so intensely invested in whoever comes in the door. It's just basic sort of level of social comfort.
Yeah, not performance, just like being nice.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I haven't had this myself, luckily, because I like to talk quite a lot, even during a tattoo session. But I do know some artists I haven't been tattooed by that like to listen to music while they're tattooing because that's how they focus. And that's not going against what we're talking about here. That's just, like you said, if you're open about that and you're like, hey, that's my process. So if you bring along a Switch or your phone or anything like that, we can both be chilling out and while I tattoo you.
Yeah,
that helps. It's just, but there's that level, like in the example with the girl you were talking about when you were young, that was young first tattoo, and you were a younger princess. And in any session where there is a comfort level, you sort of need to ensure.
Yeah. It needs, because it's such a like. I think I talk about this in my thesis too. Like it's a functionally intimate, vulnerable, permanent, important process for a lot of people. Like you have to make sure that the person getting tattooed is as comfortable as they are able to be, while not impacting on your, ability to do the tattoo well.
Yeah.
Like that's just necessary.
It's a balancing act because you can't do it without the client, and if they're not comfortable, they might. I mean, I've not been in the position myself, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that you could get easily, especially if you're a young, nervous person, it might be your first or one of your first tattoos. It can be very anxiety-inducing going into the tattoo studio and going through this kind of impactful thing, even if it's not a deep meaning tattoo, getting something permanently put into your skin. It is impactful,
Yeah, 100%. And I think like one of the things that I've have thought about for some time, like the idea that everyone who gets a tattoo at some point has contemplated that permanence, they've contemplated that this is there for the rest of their life.
And at least they should, I would argue. At least they should.
Well, even I think, like they're aware, or they have to tick a box that says they have. At least have to tick a box that says they understand it's a permanent mark and all that stuff. But yeah, like if someone has considered that, they've considered their own mortality, they've considered the fact that they're going to die, and this is going to like be with them for unless Gemma Angel says 6 months after they die. Months. So even if to like a tattooist, it's like a walk-in, like minimum charge job, which isn't really significant to your day, you'll probably forget about it like the moment you've done it. Like to them, that's not the case. Yeah, so I think there is an importance with every tattoo, to some extent at least, and it's probably contingent depending on the client and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's definitely at least at the level of permanence and human existence, so the existence of that particular person, then there's a degree of like importance.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's also what sometimes leads tattoo artists nowadays to sort of be guides as well in a way. Like, well, for example, often, at least when I've hung out in studios, when I used to have mates that had studios in Copenhagen and stuff like that, you would sometimes see, especially younger clients, maybe a young lad come in and be like, I remember one experience I saw where a young lad came in and was like, I just want a full sleeve first tattoo, didn't have a tattoo on him, of just skulls going down my arm. And the two artists came in and said, listen, you may think you're the new hot shit and stuff like that right now, but have you sat down and actually thought about this? Because there's a massive to start with. I would do it on you if you're sure about this, but it's just not going to make you the new Al Capone or like make you impervious going down somewhere or like make you badass or anything like that. It's a tattoo. It can be really impactful for you, but you got to think this through.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, no. So I see also when you mean guides, you mean like kind of, guiding people.
Advise people. Yeah, sorry. Second language troubles. That's what I'm going to blame it on.
No, that was probably the correct word. I just didn't understand quite the context. But yeah, I get you. That's, that is a big part of the job. So like, if someone's coming in for the first tattoo and it's on the face, then you're probably going to encourage them not to get it on the face or not do it, and that is just a part of the occupation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's also the whole, in a smaller aspect, when you might advise them on any design they may have brought in or ideas they might have, because you have more so than I think anybody realizes before they actually get their first tattoo and see a drawing on the skin, especially on their own skin. You don't really realize how different it is from drawing on paper and the composition you may need to do to suit the body and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that. I mean, I did sort of intellectually understand that would be the case, but I didn't fully understand that to any extent, really, to any meaningful extent, until I started to do it. So even if you are aware of the industry and are actively like a participant in the culture, you say like the degree to which it's like the medium dictates what is possible or what is easier to make happen visually is quite significant.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, because the body, I just realized, in a weird way, it's not to dehumanize us as who get tattoos, but it is the material as well. It's not just the inks and the machines. The body is the material as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's the thing that you do, like, making the mark on. It just happens to be sentient.
I mean, I should hope so. If it's not, something's happened during the session.
Well, tip the box. No, I'm joking.
Oh, that'll be a bad advertisement for your studio. Well, you got to sign this petition that you may actually croak on the board.
Yeah, no, I'm very gentle. I'm very gentle.
I imagine so. I mean, but that's the thing. Like, it goes further than that, because you may be great at drawing or you may have done tattooing and all that, but that's the thing. Like, as anybody can say that goes into this industry, and I think you very much explained quite eloquently, there's so many more aspects to it that people sometimes don't think through when they think like, oh yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. I think that's you can only know it through doing it or reading like long form textual accounts with examples. Hence trying to do that in my PhD. because the preceding sort of literature was, I mean, there is like a sociological account of tattooing from non-tattooists, which are fairly decent to some extent. You know, they have interviews with practitioners, they make insights, and like based on those conversations. But that first-hand tacit knowledge can't really be. You can't draw that out of someone. You have to have experienced it. So if you go into the role of a tattooist, like I think, yeah, you can't prepare for what that is, and really understand what that is without just doing it and reading around the subject. So the preceding literature about that is mainly the Samuel Stewart, who wrote Bad Boys and Tough Tattoos from like the 50s. That's the only account. And well, George Bush at Memoirs of a Tattooist as well, but to a different extent. But Sam Stewart's like account is the only one really that is kind of comparable in terms of its first-hand insight, but it's in the 50s and it's in America.
Exactly. We may need some updated material here though.
Yeah, and its focus is very psychosexual. So it was a very different kind of presentation of information and focal points. So yeah, it is like, it's not stuff like if you go and feel like, oh, I'm interested in tattooing because I'm interested in drawing, like there's more to it.
I mean, it's important. It's good if you can draw and if you can draw well, but it's the whole thing, like you were talking about, even not looking at the finances and the sort of bureaucratic side of tattooing nowadays, and how you make sure you have all the inks, you make sure you have the right equipment and all that stuff, and know a good studio you can work in if you are somewhere to get an apprenticeship. It's the whole thing where like you're saying, you can't teach that beforehand, the whole, oh yeah, now you have a client in here that suffers from social anxiety and they want to get a tattoo and they really want to get a tattoo by you, so how do you handle that,
Yeah, that's again, like I think there is, it's not really relevant to the point directly, but I think it's important to know. Like I think there's a benefit in coming into tattooing a little bit later in life. Like I originally asked Bez to give me an apprenticeship when I was like 18 or whatever, when I was getting tattooed by him, and he said no. And I'm really grateful that he said no, because like you acquire life experience that makes you better at speaking to people, understanding people, like just becoming an adult really. And then you can apply that into your practice at a later date, which I think there's something like you can often tell a tattooer who's so kind of came into it a little bit later because they're perhaps well-rounded in that regard. They have a life experience. I mean, obviously the like ones who've always done it since they were like 18, they acquire that through time 100%. But yeah, I'm just like, I feel like there's a gratitude that comes with those who like came into it a bit later and have other jobs to compare it to.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like they may have learned already how to handle different personalities and work together with people of different backgrounds and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah,
which is also, even though I think some people, especially like you say, younger people that want to get into tattooing, may think of tattooing as so different from other jobs that they neglect how it's also in other aspects very similar to other jobs.
Yeah, but so much better.
I mean, forever jealous about a lot of aspects about being a tattoo artist.
I not recently, but like I worked prior to working full-time as a tattooist, I was working like a 0.8 contract teaching in the Manchester area with the intention to do one day's tattooing while teaching. And in December, I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not worth the hassle. I'm like, I'm just going to tattoo, and it's so much nicer.
I can imagine. I mean, there's sort of that. I mean, it's sort of nice to steer it to a lighter note, you could say right now, the interview, but there are some aspects to it that are quite romantic still and quite awesome in the job, like sort of even when you don't account for the traveling, sort of a vagabond, make your own rules kind of thing, where you very much can to some extent plan out your own days.
Yeah, there's something really nice about self-employment. There's obviously like downsides to it, but yeah, I think that's what I kind of was thinking about earlier when I said tattoos to come to it at a later date, like after having done other jobs. Like there's a gratitude that they possess for doing that instead. Like, it's so much nicer to get up at a different time.
Escaping the 9 to 5.
Yeah, like doing like I can like go to a yoga class and then go for a coffee with my friend and then start work and then leave like kind of not when I want, but like if it's quiet, like at 6 still.
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
that's so nice.
but
Like
there's also, I mean, another aspect I'm jealous of is also that I don't think we'll ever see a tattoo studio that can get so big that it's like working for a corporation or any big company or anything like that. So there's a maybe more personal level, both with the people you work with, but also with the people you tattoo.
oh yeah, 100%. I think there are like some chain tattoo studios, I believe. I don't know too much about it, but of a chain like
I mean, they do exist. I know of that, but I can't
yeah.
think of any off the top of my head at the moment.
I can't think of the name of them, but even so, like the tattooists in there and the clients in there are like, you can't have the same tattooist in two studios at the same time, not at least in the same day. So yeah, it's very much like a personal offering, no matter what. So yeah, I
Plus, I
agree.
mean, you often develop long-term clients as well that come back and
Dude,
you sort of get to know them and all that stuff.
yeah. So there's like with the romance of it that you mentioned and like the magic of it, I suppose. Like it's it's that with that vulnerability and intimacy and the durational aspect of it, like even for a minimum charge quick tattoo, for me at least, I'll be with a client for like 30 minutes or more with getting the design, getting the stencil, doing the tattoo, talking through aftercare, wrapping them up, all that stuff. That's at least 30 minutes for me. Others can do it quicker, but I talk to them too much. And that's like what other like
Yeah.
industry where you just kind of even if it's something small like getting a procedure done, do you really have that level of potential for connection with another human in? I can't think of many, not with
I
the
mean,
enhanced like um idea of permanence and pain and the power hierarchy that you have to sort of balance. Like that's quite well, it's very unique to tattooing to my mind.
no, I fully agree, and I'm happy you mentioned one of the terms that you used there because I think you're one of the main people to talk about the power hierarchy you're talking about. Can
Yeah,
you elaborate a bit on that, Adam?
yeah. So if you're um in a position where the other person is sort of like, well, they have to kind of surrender to being in pain for a duration of time and put their trust in you to make this mark on a permanent basis. Like there's a lot of power that you have to take on in doing that, and it's necessary to make sure that that client is comfortable at all times and that you give them like not make them comfortable to voice any concerns, any questions, all that kind of stuff. So there's a power there that you have to kind of like make sure is um I don't know how to articulate it, but
Well, I think
the
it's a bit similar to as you know a bit as well, having done a PhD, where you use qualitative methods. It's a bit like when you conduct an interview for a research project where you have to, make sure they're comfortable. You also have to make sure you're safe and you can do your job correctly. And you can't lord like without doing that. I can't sort of use my power position as being the researcher to sort of force them to talk about stuff they maybe wouldn't or like make them uncomfortable in that way.
yeah. So you have to like so if it's conversational sort of things as well. Like if someone is in a position where they're if you're chatting while tattooing someone, which many clients will find helpful, it's that, and this is something I mentioned in chapter 4 of my PhD. There's the balance between personal and professional that you have to sort of walk along and navigate, and knowing how, if someone's talking about a bereavement or whatever, but you've just met them, you need to know, like, what level of vulnerability are they wanting to access, and what information are they wanting to share, and is that helpful to them, and are you able to be a suitable person to respond to that? Like, how, so there's all these kinds of
you sort of have to judge with yourself as well, because even if they're open to sharing, you may not feel well equipped to talk about that with them, or you may yourself as a tattoo artist feel uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, 100%. So that's I suppose the power dynamic that I alluded to. To be honest, it's been a little, like, I think I finished my PhD in 2021, and I haven't read it much since. So I've been out with my own stuff, but just based on sort of tacit, I guess, experience, that's kind of where that example of power dynamics comes into it.
Yeah, because the only other place where it really comes in, but there's a very more clearer dynamic, is the payment, where it's very clear, however long it's lasted, they pay the rate you've set more often.
So set rate or hourly pricing or whatever, like however a tattooist does it, or like what other studio operates, like, that's the other, it's like you'll see accounts by or hear accounts if you listen to like tattoo podcasts as well, like of tattooists talking about that money exchange, that financial exchange part at the end, how it can feel a bit like weird to have this like deep, meaningful, heartfelt conversation, then you're like, or just like to laugh with someone for a while and feel like you're just with your friends, and then afterwards to be like £400.
Well, I mean, if the therapist can do it, so can you guys.
Well, yeah. It is. It's. I'm glad that we have desk staff.
I imagine so. But that is, as you pointed out, that is another aspect of it people don't realize, because you become, as we talked about throughout this interview, you become familiar with people. And I've had many people where I've just about become friends with some artists I've worked with. Sometimes even prior to getting to tattooed, and then you get to the point where I'm very good with it, because I know I'm very much keen on, okay, I know it's a service, I'm gonna pay them, even if they're a mate. I don't want to discount anything. I just want to pay them what I owe them. But I get how for other people you become so familiar that you feel like, what do I do now? When is it appropriate to go into the whole money question now? Because we're just been having a laugh for 6 hours.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I think most people certainly who I get on with, like, understand that and appreciate, it's still a service, and like, if someone's your friend and they want to be tattooed by you, they're very likely going to want to support you. You might give them a bit of a preferential rate, set a set price, and stay a little later and finish, or whatever. There might be some ways of doing it, but and that's the same for regular clients. Like, if it's like a bigger piece, but like everyone who, if you get on with, well, for me at least, if I get on with someone, they have that mutual sort of understanding and respect of those things. So fortunately, it's okay. But I guess
I do love how you keep guarding all your bases, Adam, by going for me at least.
Say again, sorry.
I love how you keep guarding all your bases, Adam, as we say in Denmark, by going for me at least all the time.
Yeah. Because
I would say with some of the things you're talking about, I think we can very easily infer that I would say for most it'll be very much like that.
Yeah, quite well. Yeah, I imagine, but I can't speak for the global population of tattooists.
No, I know.
As far as I try.
but not to draw the attention to something sour now, but how important is it also to be able to handle difficult clients, or do bad experiences happen more often than one might think as well?
I think that's so. It really depends on multiple things. I think the type of studio you work in, may, in the geographical location and all these sorts of things, like will probably affect that. In my experience, I'm from, you know, a very working class background, and I did my apprenticeship in Sunderland, which is a very, you know, it's a post-industrial town, working class history. And I suppose culturally, perhaps it's not comparable to Manchester where I work now. There's very people who are getting tattooed or there don't ask for the same kind of stuff, and it's a different sort of clientele entirely. So one of the things that I mentioned in my PhD, and I spoke about briefly at the conference, an example of sort of a negative experience. So there was a client who I was tattooing some tribal on, which is, I know it's kind of having a resurgence, but this was it was continuing something he already had. I wasn't like doing it from scratch. I was just filling it in black. It's a whole different story as to if you should do tribal or whatever. Anyway, so I was filling that in black and just having a conversation with him, getting on fine. Didn't have anything in common really, but he seemed fine. He seemed like a nice enough person. And then he was from somewhere else in England. I can't remember specifically where, but I asked why, like, what made him move? Was it like work? Was it a partner or whatever? And he said, in quotes, where he's from has a big Asian problem. And as he said that, like, again, I was learning at this point. I found myself like going really, really hard with the machine, and he was bleeding like significantly. And I was like, oh shit, I should do that. So even like it wasn't a conscious thing to do that. But at that point, because I was learning to tattoo, I realized that I needed to go a little bit deeper, not as deep as I had. I probably scarred him, but I'm not that bothered.
I get why, to be honest.
Yeah. But I needed to go deeper because I was having problems with saturation at that point. And I was like, oh, this is actually the correct element of depth. I haven't caused like harm with this amount of pressure. That's actually appropriate. But yeah, still in that conversation, like he said something that I'm like fundamentally at disagreement with. And I need to figure out how to approach that. You can't just be like, get out. I mean, some people may
I mean, I would almost guarantee you there are some artists that is absolutely what they're gonna do. They're gonna be like, you know what, you take your money and fuck off. Like,
yeah. I mean, maybe, but as an apprentice, when you're
as an apprentice, you would never do that. Like, I don't think I can. As much as I can point to established artists that would be like, "Oh, you're going against my principles." There's the door. I can't think of a single apprentice that has that kind of confidence, power, or financial stability yet to be oh, I'm getting paid to tattoo skin right now, so I'm gonna.
So my attempt at navigating that was just talking about how much I love Asia and how I go as often as I can, and how everyone who I've met there has been so accommodating and friendly and all this kind of stuff. And just divert the conversation. And then I think he started to like then backtrack a little bit, and it became a bit more comfortable, but hopefully, you know, get out of that ditch that I was in terms of social experience and into something a little bit more mutually comfortable for us both. But yeah, you have experiences, not necessarily, that's quite a specific example, but you will have people who like you don't necessarily get on with, or who are having a very hard time with the pain, or who are like bereaved in some way, and they're getting a tattoo in reference to a bereavement, and that can be really difficult to work around, and requires a certain set of skills that.
Oh, indeed. I can't remember who it was, but there was two artists I knew at one point where they had this person that had been tattooing for a while. They had some mental health issues and that, but they had them in check. But one day they came in, like out of nowhere. They hadn't set up a session, and just came in, barging in, and they were clearly, having an episode of some kind and might have been off their meds and stuff. And he luckily like the way he handled that was just talking. I can't remember. I think it was he at least. The tattooer at least handled it by, you know, talking them down and getting them to leave the studio, because tattooing them in that state, they'll just possibly give them something they're gonna very much regret, and they might even cause them some sort of distress, you know.
Yeah. So there's multiple examples of how, like, I guess, like, experiences can be negative or challenging, at least. They're just, it's because tattooing is a medium that's, like, very much to examine it is, you have to do it case by case, really.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Examine it, you have to have context isolated, you have to have positionality of both client and practitioner, and all of the factors that might affect their practice, might affect their tattoo. You have to have the design itself. Like, there's no way of giving a universal framework for understanding these things that is exact. So you have to just do broad. So that's why in my PhD, when I look at that aspect of the tattooist's non-material role, I isolate three factors that affect that. So the one that we're talking about now, I've termed navigating tension as part of the non-material aspect of the role. And then the way that tension manifests is dependent on all of these complex and contingent factors.
It could be anything. Like, I've heard all sorts of stories throughout the years, and having worked for arguably shitty tattoo magazines, but working for tattoo magazines as well when I was younger, or publications, as I would say. One of them wasn't a magazine, but you hear so many stories, and some of them are very much just about, you know, tattooers when they get the financial I almost spoke Danish there for a second. the financial stability to sort of put their foot down on some aspects, where some have talked about stories of, like, somebody comes in, hey, I want a swastika on me, and they're like, nope, no racist tattoos in here. But way back in the day, when there wasn't many clients because of no Instagram and that, you had very anti-racist tattooers when they were apprentices. They were like, oh fuck, but I'm working at this biker shop and this guy wants some skinhead stuff, I'll just have to do it. That must be rough back then, I can imagine. Nowadays, is even before you get very established, if you're apprenticing in a good studio, at least I would imagine, you still get to at least keep some principles of yours.
For sure. Like, in better studios, and I think the old school ones, those sorts of misogynistic ones, I think they'll die out. It's, you know,
I think they already are. Like, I mean, even some of the worst ones today aren't at that level where it's like really bracing or anything like that.
Yeah, because they can't get away with it. Like,
they wouldn't get clientele nowadays, I don't think.
The generations of younger people who are a large part of, not all, of course, but a large part of tattooing clientele, like, they're just more switched on because they've been brought up in a different environment culture. So you can't get away with performing like that. And then when, you know, even if they had newer tattooists working in these environments, that probably either move to a different studio that's, like, more contemporary in its outlook, or take over that studio and change its cultural values. So it's a matter of time before that dies out. At least I certainly hope, and I can only imagine it will be.
I think I would actually agree with that. Like, I sort of see it going that way as well, because I see more and more apprentices or younger tattooers, so to speak, in our age generation and younger still, that very much from the start are, like, very clear of their principles and what they want to do. And as I see it, I think that's sort of come, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the tattooer out of the two of us, but it's also very much come with how they have more freedom today to develop their own styles, and very much develop their own sort of idea of what kind of tattooing they want to do and what sort of clientele they might want to attract.
I mean, the market is saturated, and there's so many tattooists. So there's all, like, with that, I guess there's, like, I guess you could say there's a requirement to have your own thing, or there's not a requirement, but there's space to have your own style, or your own approach, or your own attempt at an approach, at least.
That sounded like a bit
that was at my expense.
Oh, fair enough.
It wasn't anyone
I'll say you have your own approach, Adam. Don't be so hard on yourself.
But yeah, like I think there's space for stuff, you know. Like there's a big sort of I don't know, like at least I perceive this to be the case. I can't, you know, I haven't done the research on this, but it seems that there's this idea with some kind of culture of tattooing that certain types of tattooing aren't like relevant or whatever. So stick and poke tattooing or like what, like ignorant style, I think it gets termed, that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the new ones, ignorant style. Yeah. And then there's that new, those really thin, for lack of a better term, emo tribals.
Yeah. Like
I can't remember what it's called. It's some cyberpunky like kind of term.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily been given a formal categorization, but I think I've heard it in.
No, but you know what I mean, right? There was
tribal,
often just an outline, a very bladed sort of like.
Yeah, I know exactly. But there's a lot of like, you know, so something like that happens, and then within the culture, in some aspects of the culture, there seems to be like just shit talking, really. But I'm like, why do you care? Like you know, you don't have to listen to Justin Bieber.
There's so much, like, at least nowadays, unlike even when we were younger, like in the early 2000s and that, before or the late like 10s, when I started getting tattooed in 2008, it very much seemed like, oh shit, the new tattoo trend is out. We all have to now do Japanese, we now all have to do neo traditional because that's what the clients want. And nowadays it's just, hey, there's clients for everybody and every conceivable style. So even if you don't want to do the trends, if you are savvy and can do your style well, you'll probably find some clientele.
Yeah. I mean, if you're capable of using the medium in a craft-like manner, as in able to, you know, understand the material and the skin, which I suppose is a material, and apply pigment into skin in accordance to the client's brief. It doesn't have to be a specialist. Most of the work that I do, like I'll do a lot of flash pieces, which is great, but like in between that, the majority of the tattoos that I do are just walk-in things that I don't advertise, just names, dates, that type of thing. And I love it, you know, I love doing it, but it's nothing of me in there. It doesn't require.
No, it's not like your personal style or anything like that.
Yeah, there's like the element of me that is present, the authorial input is, I suppose, directions to what will work with the medium. So making something a certain size so it doesn't like merge into each other over time. Like selection of fonts, the way I might like, I don't know, line something might be slightly different to how another tattooist does it, but even with the same template. So although it will show an element of my authorial input, it's very different to if someone got a flash piece.
Yeah, or a custom design from you.
Design or something where I've like, you know, made it for them in that specific brief. So if someone is able to use the craft-like mechanisms of the medium and do it, then like, yeah, do that, and then in between do your own thing. Like I don't see a problem with having a specialism in that regard with the saturation.
No. I mean, I might digress a bit here, but it's sort of a proof of that is how, regardless of how many brilliant professional tattooers we have nowadays, and even using different mediums to tattoo, like doing tabaki, you can get that done professionally, you can get tabori done professionally, you can get hand poke done, or, you know, mainstream machine tattooing, you know, rotary or coil. Yet we still see scratching happen quite a lot of people sitting in dorm rooms or halls and around the UK and stuff and tattooing each other at parties, and that's what baffles me at times.
Well, that's the problem. I think part of the craft like process involves an understanding of hygiene and all of those other non-material aspects that we've briefly spoken about, though probably not at the depth that is necessary to. But you know, the like the all of that sort of stuff that can't, like that's beyond just the pigment and the skin, you know. Plus the hygiene and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where it becomes risky. But that's not really, to me, that's not comparable to the tattooing industry. That's just some
I agree.
Like I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think people should do it, but I don't think that I should say they shouldn't. If you know what I mean. Like
No,
I
I
don't.
mean, I fully get what you mean. Like that, it's their body, it's their life. If they truly want to do that, and it's powerful, or impactful to them in the moment, go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't
If
think.
they ask my advice, I'll always rather say, "Hey, there are professional hand pokers out there."
Yeah,
If it's because you don't want it done by machine, I'd still recommend saving up a bit of money, going to a professional, and getting it beautifully done.
yeah, yeah. And I know.
But for some, it is just that for them. Like they just prefer that whole like scratchy look, and that it's done by friends and stuff like that. And I can sort of
Yeah,
get behind that. I can understand that. That there's some.
yeah, if it's done hygienically and it's with
Yeah.
friends, whatever, then I don't ethically see a problem, you know?
Oh no.
That's probably controversial to say. I don't know. I don't think tattoos would agree with that, really, but that's my take on it anyway.
I mean,
Like,
the
I don't
best take I heard from a tattooer about it once was that he said, I don't, he very much disagreed with how some tattooers said, hey, this is stealing business from us because they're not coming into us. And he said, no, it's not, because they're coming in later to get it covered up.
But that I also, I suppose, if they are after that type of tattoo, but unless if someone like that is getting a tattoo because it's the friend and they want to have a bit of fun, you're not offering that. You're offering that's the distinction between the medium and like the other things that are involved. Like that experience for someone at a party or whatever getting a tattoo, like I'm not offering that. Like
no, exactly.
I'm sober when I'm tattooing, and I'm insisting that the client is, you know.
Yes.
That's not what the medium is like. Not the thing that they're drawn to. It's
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
or at least it's very likely not the thing in isolation that they're drawn to. You know.
No, yeah, I think I agree. I think it's its own separate category very much. Like it's very
Yeah.
much not comparable to people that actually want to collect their piece, even if they just want some basic, off the wall, massive like walk-in stencils or something like that. That's still way more about actual tattoo collecting than
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah.
sit there and
It's Matt Lodder's whole thesis, a medium, not a
yes,
and it's so useful to remember that when talking about tattooing because, like, these stick and poke things or like amateur machines or whatever, like the thing in common with that and what we do in the studio like is tenuous, really.
yeah, it's like the same difference between hiring some self-taught handyman or an actual carpenter to do some work in your flat or your house. Like
Yeah.
you can do the handyman if you want to get it cheap, but it's a different thing than actually getting a real carpenter in to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Different thing.
Mm.
Same medium, same approach, whatever, different thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's fair. I mean, that's actually quite. I might be a bit quiet around it, but that's because it's really like it was a really great point you made there. That it's absolutely two separate worlds in that way.
Yeah. So the way that I like have always sort of thought about it is like there's music, we understand music as a concept, and there's instruments within that, and you can make loads of different sounds on a guitar, for example, and they're not going to appeal to everyone. They're not approached for the same reason, whatever, but none's better than the other. The standards and criteria by which you can judge them, which are like maybe pre-established and understood, and there's like maybe more conservative and rigid ones that are more common, but Daniel Johnston to me is just as relevant as King Crimson, two of my favorite artists who have very different approach, very different sonic qualities, but just as much value.
Yeah.
Like tattooing doesn't have to be any different from that.
On that note, and that's a sort of way to round this off, Adam. And this may be a risky proposition to ask this question of you, but what is one or two ways you would say we could improve the tattooing profession today?
It'd be nice, really. Like I think, so for me, like it's not taking yourself too seriously. Like taking the role seriously and the responsibility seriously, but not taking yourself too seriously within that. Like it's I'm so grateful that I tattoo and I'm so happy to be able to do it. But like yeah, you just like, there's so many of us. So you're just a tattooer, you know, like, and there's maybe not so much now, but in preceding sort of decades, like there's been like a gravity placed on tattooists, like tattooers are the new footballers, that sort of thing. But like, or like that's the cultural sort of impression to some extent, like that they have an importance or whatever. But like we're just people. I think in terms of the industry improving, yeah, being nice, having more inclusive and open spaces, I think is important. And it doesn't mean to not have like a respect and homage for like homages to traditional tattoo culture. I think that's important too, but like we can still move on from some of the outdated values.
Aye. It's a bit like how most of the tattoo conventions that stay alive today have moved away from having strippers at the after party and stuff like that, you know?
Like that in total tattoo, getting rid of like semi-nude
Yeah.
ladies to sell magazines, like that type of thing.
Which
Like
is a brilliant tattoo magazine, by the way, Total Tattoo. Like
yeah,
that is
yeah.
probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a great deal in England that are that sort of, long-standing and publicly visible. With that and Skin Deep ended, but I believe that they said that when they took the decision to move away from having like, sexy images on the front cover, their sales dropped quite significantly. And yeah, I know, but I think it's quite you know, important that they continue to not do that, and
Yeah.
credit to them for it. It's a step in the right direction, like to not necessarily to not put tattooing out as this thing that's like different to what it is. So yeah, more inclusive, non-archetypical, at least culturally archetypical spaces for tattooing. I think letting like within all creative industries, actually, I find, at least the ones that I've been involved in, which are mainly illustration, to some extent graphic design and tattooing, female or female identifying people are so much more prevalent than males. More so in illustration, I suppose, than tattooing, but like letting that be like more culturally celebrated and recognized. I know obviously it is, but part of the reason it is, it's because it's like, oh, there's a attractive female tattoo. Like that's not relevant. Like female fronted spaces, queer fronted spaces, all that stuff. Like it's just in tune with culture now. Like yeah, I think that's one of the ways that tattooing could be perhaps improved. I don't know, like my response to this question isn't based in any existing research. It's just sort of loose thoughts.
No, I mean, I was also more, I mean, of course, it's cool to know your professional opinion as well, that aspect, but also just as a tattooer, it's nice to know,
yeah,
how you feel about it. So,
yeah, I think
on that,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, sorry, you.
I was just going to say, in summary, just being nice.
Yeah, no, fully agree. Like it can all sort of fit under that umbrella category. And on that lovely note, before we end this, Adam, would you please tell people? I know you said it at the beginning, but just so it's very clear, plug yourself. Where can people find you? Where can people find your work? Do you have any projects going at the moment? Feel free to talk about that as well.
Yeah, so I'm meant to be writing a monograph with Bloomsbury. So it's like my PhD thesis converted into still an academic book, but less like within the jargon of design. But I got really stressed out and was like, I don't want to do it anymore. And they were like, well, you can have a contract where you can sort of pick it up at a later date. So I might be doing that. I don't know. I'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, just tattooing and illustration stuff, and I'll apply to do various things as and when I sort of feel ready for it. But my website is Adam McDade, so ADAMMCDADE .weebly.com, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. And then my Instagram is at Adam McDade Illustration. And I'm tattooing in Manchester at Flesh, in Lloyd Street. And then occasionally I'll go to the Northeast, my old studio, and do tattoos there as well, which is 666 Studios in Sunderland. So yeah, if anyone wants tattoos, I do weird sort of. Have a look and come get some. That would be nice.
Thank you so much, Alan, for taking part. And stay tuned, people, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.